Hey there, beautiful people. This is Black Queer Canon. I'm Mikelle Street.
And I'm Tre'vell Anderson. And as you know, we've been here putting together our canon of Black queer characters, the folks who deserve a little, respect on their name.
Yes, every episode in this inaugural season, we're building out our very own canon of film and TV characters that have paved the way when it comes to Black, queer, and trans representation on screen. And along the way, we'll be joined by a few extra special friends that'll help tease it all out. In our first few episodes, we place Noah, Cleo, Blaine, and Antoine into the canon. Tre'vell, tell the folks who's coming this week.
So for this episode, 2 tears in a bucket, motherfuck it. That is a quote from who we are talking about today. And that is the Lady Chablis, who starred as a version of herself in the 1997 picture, directed by Clint Eastwood, called Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. This is a movie that is based on a book. The book follows this, basically it's telling you about this small town, Savannah, Georgia, and different characters in that town. One chapter of the book is dedicated to the Lady Chablis. And when the book was optioned into a movie, one of my favorite stories here is that she campaigned to play this version of herself in the movie. And the character is this, textually, she's only ever described as a drag queen, but in so many different ways, so many innuendos and sly jokes and whatnot that are, in the film. I think we all regard the character as a trans woman, despite not necessarily that articulation on screen. And I think one of the reasons why we've placed her in this canon, right, is one, people, act like, again, I've said this multiple times on the show, I'm gonna keep saying it, okay, that trans folks, dropped onto the face of the earth with Laverne Cox and Orange is the New Black.
Right.
And they did not. We did not. And so you have a character here who, is quite self-possessed in ways that we don't even see trans characters are today. The character is also, she don't die at the end, which, just to be quite honest, right? So many Black trans narratives that we do see, and even some queer ones, right, end in somebody dying. And so those are some initial reasons why I think, like, when we started this process, I was like, the Lady Chablis has to be on this canon. What is your first memory? Like, were you familiar with the Lady Chablis prior to this process? How did you, find your way into this film and this character?
No, so I wasn't familiar with the film. I think I had been familiar with the Lady Chablis just from my sort of
You do a lot of reporting on
knowledge of
drag.
yeah, that kind of stuff. And actually, to your point earlier around whether or not she's written textually as a trans character, I feel like that was common, which we've talked about this before, right? It's kind of common back then for there not to necessarily be that much of a difference between a trans character and a drag queen. Mostly because I don't know that culture understood that there was much of a difference.
The language, yes.
Besides, it's light outside and it's not. Like, I don't know that there's not much of a difference. So I mean, which is to be fair, kind of how we today notice if a character was trans back then or not.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's like, well, no, she went out in the daytime to her appointment the same way. So she wasn't in drag. So yeah, but I don't think that I had ever watched the film before we started this process, but I had been sort of casually aware of the Lady Chablis as it.
And it's a long movie.
I enjoyed it.
I'm glad you did. I'm so glad you did, but it is a long movie. And the Lady Chablis is not the star.
Well,
she is a side character.
I think you should ask her.
Well, we can't. Okay, but to your point though, I will note that, like, this role, it was a mainstream movie, which often means quote unquote white movie, which a number of the other folks in our canon are not and did not have some sort of, mainstream, visibility. But the movie, because of its success and the book's success, bestseller, all of that, she became like this cult celebrity in a lot of ways. I venture to say that she was, at a time, probably the best known, black trans person maybe in the world,
Mhm.
considering that particular era and where this character specifically, falls into the conversation. And we've been talking a lot about, like, archetypes and how these characters fit certain archetypes. You described a character in one way that I would love us to dive a little into. You said that she gives, femme queen antics in
Yeah.
terms of how she carries herself. Say more.
So, I mean, this isn't my term. The girls, when I say the girls, I mean the girls. They say this. I picked it up from one of them. And to me, it describes, it's kind of interesting to go into because I think it speaks to a level of kind of like passability and those kinds of things, right?
Sure.
Is if there's this assumption that most trans people are living to be stealth and aspiring to be stealth and aspiring to pass. Femme queen antics are the things that you do when people are like, oh no, she's not trying to be
Right.
stealth. Like them is, for lack of better terms, it's like these are the things that'll get you clocked.
Mm-hmm.
Like you crashing out over certain things and, over little things and
Mhm.
like, yeah, it's just a little, I don't want to say crazy because that word is stigmatized.
That is stigmatized.
But they're antics.
They are antics.
Eccentricities.
I like
right?
to describe it as, I think the word I already used was self-possession. There's like a way that you carry, that
Yeah.
these characters that fall in this line carry themselves, right? That is, that is very much interested in taking up space.
Correct. And right. And I think it is it's kind of this rejection of a level of femininity that is sort of docile and submissive and subservient, right? And so I think that it is kind of a rejection of that.
Yeah.
And some people think of it as kind of this ability to live within all of oneself, all of, you know what I mean? Like some people who identify as femme queens, they identify as femme queens because they are like, no, I do not identify. I'm not a man, right? I'm not a woman. I am something other, right? Like I think when you think about Octavia Saint Laurent, everybody refers to her as trans woman, which she was, but she thought of herself as a third gender, and so they think of themselves as their totality. They don't think about giving up one thing to become another. They think about themselves as a sum of all of their parts. And I don't mean that like in a punny way, but sorry, that was not intended as a joke.
Right.
But they do think of themselves as a sum of all of their experiences,
Absolutely.
and that means they take up space in all those things, and very much like T.S. Madison, right? Like I do not deny
T.S.
any
Madison,
part of me.
yes.
I am all of these things and more. So,
and we see that in the film, right? There's this scene with the Lady Chablis attending this black debutante, cotillion situation, and she is, breaking up the space.
right.
Like she knows that one, she's not on the invite list. Okay. And she knows by even the dress that she wears, right? That you're going to be looking and I want you to look. But also I'm going to play in your face because she's also treated, all the men's is looking, all the women are also looking, but she's also given this like desire in that scene by the young person who's like dancing with her in that moment. And I think that is a great characteristic of this kind of archetype. To your point of being, fully in control of your total identity, who you are, your entire history. Even the scene in which she's like, where he's like, I saw in the phone book that it's, F. DeVoe. And she, cheekily turns and said, the F is for Frank.
Right. It's very much like that is, it is what it is. And I think it comes from this idea, which isn't, new or novel, right? This idea that like, if I'm going to be the other, it is going to be of my choosing, right? Like if I'm going to stand out, because of whatever, I'm going to stand out in the way that I choose to do this. I'm going to be self-possessed. I'm going to take up this space. I'm going to own this space. And we had talked before about this. It's this idea kind of like, if you were going to relegate me, to the underground or to the whatever,
Mhm.
I'm going to run
Mhm.
this. I'm going to be in charge of all of the
Mhm.
space that you have said that I have to be in.
Very
Right?
Electra Abundance.
Very that. Very
Uh-huh.
that.
I think she easily falls under this same similar
Mhm.
archetype.
Yeah.
Yeah. It in that way of like, I want to be the queen of the underworld if that's where you're going to, place me.
Right.
Okay. All right. Let's take a break. Okay. And then we will be joined by a wonderful actress, comedian, Quei Tann, who will also help us dive a little deeper into the Lady Chablis.
Welcome back to the Black Queer Canon. Joining us to discuss all things the Lady Chablis, actress, comedian, Quei Tann. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I was
Thanks for being here.
Did I say your name right?
You did.
Oh, I was like, she made a face, girl.
I made a face because typically, comedy or like things go in three. So you're just like actress, comedian.
Oh.
I was like, what is the next thing gonna be?
Literally,
Oh.
I
Is it gonna
say
be-
that all the time. Like, it's supposed to be 3.
It's supposed to be 3.
Yeah.
And how I introduce myself is I go, coming to the stage, she's a triple threat. She's had strep throat, chlamydia, herpes. Make it loud for Quei Tann.
I see. Not quite our intro, but similar.
Just a third. You can find something,
I love that. Okay, so this is going to be a great conversation about the Lady Chablis. You're already giving it to us. Let's start with the basics. What was your introduction to this character?
This podcast.
Period.
No,
Well.
no. My introduction was RuPaul's Drag Race, and it was specifically the Lady Chablis was when the Essence of Beauty, Jada Essence Hall, did her on Snatch Game, season 12, and this is the pandemic season, and but before then, as I'm learning these terms that I have been hearing on Drag Race and hearing in the community, the doll, hiding my candy,
Right.
that comes from mama, from mother. And so she's been a part of my life for longer than I even realized.
Period. And I think a lot of people don't even recognize, right, that type of connection. And we also just had the opportunity to see the full film. I want to say it was 35 millimeter or whatever the original format was, at a screening here in LA that I did the Q&A for. And I've seen the movie.
I was about to say, you've been
multiple-
championing it.
I
for a while.
have.
So how did you?
Because the girls need to know their history, okay, when it comes to particularly, this visibility conversation, but especially Black trans visibility. And so I've seen the movie a few different times, but it's long. And so you ain't gonna see it a number of times, I imagine. But the reason why, the Lady Chablis is on our canon is because of this representation that she gave for the community at a time when there wasn't a lot of representation, whether we talk specifically like Black trans visibility or even, if we kind of broaden it out to this like drag character archetype. And so what I would love to hear from you, Quei, because we just watched it, what's a scene of the Lady Chablis that pops into your mind that like you think is quintessential that character?
Oh, when she's flirting with the author
Mm-hmm.
and he says, but I'm straight. And she goes, so am I. Straight to my house. I love that. I love the wit, the intelligence. And when she's at that, and you spoke about this at the Q&A at the screening, when she's at that black debutante ball that this white man is invited to, but she's hasn't even been invited to that space. And she says, I'm going to go anyway. Rather, if you want me there or no one wants me there at all, I'm going to be introduced to Black Savannah society. And to see that, to see that, right? To see her claim that space and to hear you talk about it, but then to listen to parts of her audiobook and to realize that was all real. That really happened. It really just hit me in a different way. And I was like, oh, wait. Of course, I knew that she was playing herself in the movie, but I didn't realize that, like, no, she's really playing herself in this movie, and that really, that really hit home for me. I was like, y'all really gonna accept this white man before y'all invite this white man before y'all invite her?
Yeah.
Wild.
What about for you, Mikelle?
No, I mean, I think it definitely was the backstage when he comes backstage and they're going back and forth. But it's mostly, there's, how am I going to say this? Black people, we have a penchant for a turn of phrase.
Sure.
And banter, as, RuPaul calls it, right? Like that kind of patter that an entertainer is really good at, going back and forth, keeping things comedic, but like also making sure you're getting these messages in that you want to get in there. And so I thought that scene, there was so much in that scene. It was super, they're laughing the whole time, but she's pushing it. She's like, she is flirting, right? She wants it to, she's testing to see if it's going to go somewhere. She's also testing him, his knowledge, right? She's teaching him at the same time about, he's asking her questions essentially about her transness. I mean? It's going all these places at the same time. And I just love that. I think it's so stereotypical of the some of the trans girls that I know, of drag performers that I know. Obviously, she's both an entertainer as well as a trans woman. And so I just know that like that's a type of conversation that maybe I won't hear backstage, but I'll hear like in the let out, right? Some girl talking to some guy outside of a club or something like that. So yeah, that was probably my favorite scene of hers in the film. What about you?
I love the debutante ball scene because she just, she breaks up the space, and I feel like that is exactly, what this kind of character does. Like she's both kind of disarming, but also other people can be alarmed by her presence. And I think that scene, you see the different reactions from the young guy who is, thinks she's sexy, and most of the guys think she's sexy and are intrigued to the different women's faces and responses about happening, which we could get into later as well. But one of the things I love especially about the character is that she's not the joke. Right. She is in on the joke. She is often the one giving the comedy.
She's always making the jokes.
She's always making the jokes, like you mentioned. Quei, I'm interested from your vantage point. What about the Lady Chablis you think is like that thing that puts her as like an example, that we should be talking about in terms of what representation, could look like for the community?
What makes her an example? Wow. Well, I think she avoids, and you spoke to this. I think, well, it follows her life, and she was able to play herself. She was able to have impact and autonomy over her story. I imagine when she was filming the film, but also when she was telling her story to the author. So I think this is just I think truth. I think the reason we would look at her as a model for representation is because it's true. And when you look at something that's true, it can't be stereotypical because it's honest.
Because it is honest. And maybe it also is stereotypical a little bit, but like, would they say, it's a stereotype because there's a kernel of truth, right, in that thing. Because the reality, and I might have said this earlier, but the reality is that this character, if we're going to think in terms of like archetypes of Black representation, like the character is, that sassy best friend. It is also that, Black brute. It is also the sexualized Jezebel. They do have an actual magical negress in the in the movie. Irma P. Hall, shout out to the legend. But, so that is very much present. And also, like you mentioned, you listen to her. We all both listened to her her audiobook, which she narrates herself. So you can also hear the doll, and all of those isms come out of her actual voice. But there is just something special that I think anyone, no matter who you are, how you identify, kind of can see and feel. And she definitely had, so much input and control over herself in a way that actors don't often have in many, I feel like, situations. But like you mentioned, this is also part of her life story in a lot of ways, and so I can see just that self-possession also being a very IRL thing on set as well. Do you think the Lady Chablis in this characterization is progressive, is an accurate or positive is probably a better word, kind of portrayal? Because to me, I think that even though this came out when it did, it still stands to me as probably a shining example of, like, the trans character doesn't die at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, she is not the joke, right? She is also able to, even in the court scene, right, at the end of the film, she is, she's empowered, from her own positioning. She's using it and being intentional about using that space for her aims, not just being, objectified for the prosecution's aims, or the defense's aims. And so I wonder, from your vantage point, if you looked at this movie and this character and was like, oh, y'all was doing this back then, why we still ain't doing it now? Right.
Yeah, and that's what I meant when I said it's not stereotypical. I meant it's not it doesn't fall into the same patterns of her experiencing violence and her life ending in the character's life ending in tragedy. You really see her in the movie victoriously. And so, yeah, I think that I enjoyed her journey within this film. I thought she looked beautiful, and there's something that you said. You said that she holds her own in scenes with John Cusack, and I disagree. I don't think she holds her own. I think she absolutely steals the scene.
Okay, I'll take it.
I can't even look at anyone else other than her when she is on that screen. Comedically, she is just brilliant. And you can tell that this is a woman who has studied old Hollywood, even when she reveals her teeth. She walks up to like her door frame and like kind of poses, you know what I'm talking about? She because the author John Cusack asked her, you're listed as so and so in the phone book.
It says F. DeVoe.
F. DeVoe. Who's F? And she says, well, darling, that's me. And she walked, and I was like, oh, she just told a star. She just has it. And, when we talk about this character and the depiction, we can't really talk about that without also talking about what an enigmatic, just amazing star she is.
Mhm.
You really just fall in love with her because of her talent and her
Mhm.
presence.
You look
Yeah.
at her and you're like, oh, she's got it.
Right.
She's got it.
She's like, she's that girl.
She's
She's the empress for a reason, and you get how she could campaign to play herself, in that film. And Clint Eastwood was like, yeah, we gon' get her, bring her in here. Mikelle, I wonder for you as the how I want to answer this question. So we have spoken about how those blurbs, those jabs that the Lady Chablis does, that another character that folks might be familiar with that falls in line with that is Electra Abundance. And that popped back in my head when you were talking, Quei, about this kind of old Hollywood, essence that the Lady Chablis kind of oozed. I feel like Electra has that same
Yeah.
kind of classic, beauty Hollywood kind of.
I mean, it's like it's like the dynasty of it all. You know what I mean?
Very dynasty. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, those like it's reading. They're reading.
They're reading.
But it's at a specific level, right? It's just like these this is a funny way to say it, but like these like classy reads, right? It's like, there's a level of, again, like a level of wit, right? Like it's not just like this like dry, direct thing. There's a level of elevation to the read that,
you gotta be smart.
Right.
Well, you gotta be smart or you miss,
The thing is, it's a real read, right? Because like people say reading now, but they just mean you're attacking each other. But it's like a read is actually something that is art. There's an art form to it, right? Is that like, if you are not paying attention, you can miss that this person has dissed you, right? Which there was a way to do, there's a reason why they did that, right? Is there's a way to do it where you could be talking to this person who is not smart, and everybody else knows that you are handing them their ass, and they clearly just, it's all going over their head, which allows you to get the best of the situation while also not putting you in danger from this person because they just don't understand what's going on. And so I think they all have that kind of thing, which is, I think it's why I call it Femme Queen. We've talked about this before.
You said that?
Yes, this is Femme Queen
Your
Antics.
Femme Queen Antics?
I told you I mentioned it.
It's not my phrase. I've heard it. It's a phrase that people use.
Okay, because you were cited. There was a whole APA reference.
But yeah, I think that it's something that I know that so many femme queens do. That like it's not only that. There's this idea of like you're not going to cower, right? Like in a world that I hate to be this way, but like in a place that, or a world that like downs you and tells you shouldn't be these things, you can't be these things, right? You are refusing to accept that, and you're gonna stand upright in the spaces that you're in, and take up space in that way. And I feel like that's all a part of this, is that she's not supposed to be at the debutante ball. She not only comes in, she refuses to be, she is the center of attention for the entire time that she's there, right? I think it says something that you not only crash the party, but decide to also be the center of attention, bringing attention to the fact that you're not supposed to be there in the first place. Like, that's crazy.
Like, I know I'm not supposed to be there.
Right.
So what?
So what?
So what?
And you're going to look at me. Like, you're going to know that I'm here. And so I think there's something that's super interesting about that, particularly when you think about kind of the other trans characters, I think are often about not standing out in that way. Right. I think that's what I refer to as kind of the femme queen antics of it all. Like, they're not interested in passing or living stealth or anything like that. Right. It is if I'm going to be other, I'm going to be the star. Like if I'm going to stand out, if you're going to say that I am different than everybody else, then I'm going to make that difference be so
I'm be the best different you ever seen.
Right. Exactly. Right. Like that you're never going to forget me, right? If you're going to talk about me, you're going to talk about me in the ways that I want you to, right? I'm going to give you something to talk about. And I think that that's what is super indicative about both of these characters, right? I think if you think about the difference between Electra and Blanca, I think about the scene where after Electra bails Blanca out of jail that one night, and she's doing it because she needs her to come back to the ball so she could beat her. And they get into this back and forth.
Yeah.
And Electra's like, I don't know why you're busying yourself with this business or whatever it is, but I need you at this ball because this is all that matters. Like, this is what we have been relegated to. So this is what matters. And I'm going to be the best at it. And to be the best at it, I need to beat you. So you got to be there.
I'll just say as a just a little something about me, a self-disclosure. I'm in therapy school. I love Pose and I love everyone that was a part of it, but as a contemporary, modern Black trans actress, I was flown out to New York for callbacks in front of Ryan Murphy and the whole team to audition, poured out my heart and didn't get it, and contemplated throwing myself off of a roof. Also,
he said, maybe let's not go there.
No. So I'm listening. I'm taking this in, but I just wanted to let you know the actress part of me is kind of freaking out. No. But I love it.
Back to Lady Chablis.
No. And I will say, I can't be bitter. I worked with Ryan Murphy. I'm on American Horror Story.
Yes, you are.
It's all fine.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I do think there is a self-possession, right, that is particularly, I think I've said that like 12 times now already, but that is particularly kind of present with the Lady Chablis that is slightly different to of the other, or I shouldn't say that because this is, anyway.
Let's hear it. Come on.
But you mentioned Blanca, you mentioned, what's the girl name?
Electra?
That one. You mentioned Electra. I'm also thinking of, the just kind of the other kind of popular conceptions of trans women, Black trans women to be specific, that we've seen. And Electra and the Lady Chablis feel like they are different in how they are moving through their spaces as opposed to some of these other characters that may or may not be impactful and notable in their own regard. But Quei, I want to ask you before we get out of here about if you feel like there are any particular lessons, right, that are to be learned from the depiction on screen that is the Lady Chablis, that other filmmakers, whether it's actresses, just John Q. Public should be thinking about when it comes to rendering stories on screen that feel accurate, that feel authentic.
Well, as a really great thing that I learned about the Lady Chablis is what you said at the Q&A, was that she didn't like the term drag queen. She liked the term female impersonator. Also, listening to her book, what's so interesting, and this goes back to what you said, if I'm going to be different, I want to be the star. She talked about, do I want to have, we call it gender confirmation surgery now? No, whatever. And she decided to not have that surgery. And she said, I'm just as much of a woman as I know myself to be. I thought that was really beautiful. She struggled with drug addiction, with meth. She also was engaged to a woman, a cis woman. So many wild stories. But the thing that really went home for me, it's such a huge depiction of who she is. But as a performer, she has this story, I believe it was with the author of The Midnight of a Garden of Good and Evil. And she said she went out one stage and did her, basically female impersonation. but she didn't talk to the audience. And the author told her, he said, you cheated your audience tonight because what they want to hear is your voice. That's why they come to see you. And she's a stand-up. She literally calls herself a stand-up act in her book. And as someone who has started stand-up and doing it for over a year, I was really inspired by that, particularly with all the anti-trans comedians of it all. And she said, and she did crowd work. That's her. That's what she would do. She would do crowd work. And she said she was looking at this guy. This guy was kind of looking at her and was looking at her weird. And she goes, "What's wrong, honey? You don't like chocolate? Or you don't like chocolate with nuts?" And I was like, this woman is so funny and so clever. And so I think people just need to, do some fucking research and just let us tell our own stories. Let us be involved. Collaborate with us, because you're not getting it right now.
Period. Okay? Period.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you, Quei Tann.
You're welcome.
For joining us, and giving us a little bit of your brilliance.
And do you mind if I just promote
Please,
myself real quick?
promote, plug.
Everyone, I'm actually promoting my book right now. I'm on a book tour. Please buy my book, We See Each Other. No,
it's a little typo at the bottom.
Oh, sorry.
Right,
this was written by...
You're a fool. You know that?
I did buy this, and you did sign it for me.
I did.
Thank you so much. Did you sign in the back?
It's in the front.
It's in the front. Okay, you signed in the front.
It's in the front. In the white page.
In the white page.
Yes, there you go.
Thank you so much.
There you go.
Well, I look for it. Well, I just wanted people to, I want to give the impression that I read. But I will be listening to the audiobook.
You should.
While she recorded.
Period. You should. It's great. I narrated myself. Okay? Period. Thank you so much for being here, Quei.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Special thanks again to our guest this week. Hope you tune in next week to Black Queer Canon, and be sure to subscribe to this here channel for more. Black Queer Canon is a production of Slayzhon. It is created, hosted, and executive produced by Mikelle Street and Tre'vell Anderson. Chris Rodgers is our associate producer and editor. For more Black Queer Canon, visit us at blackqueercanon.com. You can also follow the show on IG at Slayzhon, and subscribe to our Slayzhon YouTube page to watch the video versions of our episodes weekly. Black Queer Canon is supported by Critical Minded, an initiative to invest in cultural critics of color, co-founded by the Nathan Cummings Foundation and the Ford Foundation.